Hello, everybody, and welcome to Nessie's Dead. As always, we are your hosts, Spencer and Helen.
Hello.
And I'm on the edge of my seat because you keep saying that I am going to be familiar with today's coverage.
Yes, I feel like this should be a subject that you know, and it took me a long time to go down the rabbit hole to get to said subject. So there was a lot of back and forth, but at the end of the day, this is what I decided to present to you.
Are you going to first explain how you got to it, that rabbit hole?
Yeah, so this week I was back and forth and back and forth. So first on Monday, and we usually record on Wednesday, I thought I'll just cover a serial killer. That'll be fun. So I started looking into some cases here and there, and then I was over it. And so I was like, well, maybe I'll cover a cold case. That would be interesting. That's not something that I have touched on. I know it's something that you like. And cold case led me to Missing 411. But as I dove into Missing 411, I realized I've only got 2 days now to put this together. And that is going to be
Missing 411 is insane. There is first of all, so many cases to talk about. And it's like, where do you begin? And how do you choose which one to cover? And also it's like, there's so much backstory to everything. And each case has its own theories. It's just, that one's insane. That one could be a tag team.
A tag team, definitely. And so when I was going through, I wanted to start out first with maybe like the missing people and then go into information about it. Then I stumbled upon a very interesting case, which brought me to where this happened at, which led me down a rabbit hole to talk about what we're going to be talking about today.
Okay.
So are you ready to take the plunge?
I am.
All right. So for today, I decided to take you to a place whose origins can actually be traced back to the Earth's tectonic plate shifts. It's sacred, mysterious, full of strange activity, ancient giants, connections to the lost city of Atlantis, and many unexplained disappearances. And this place is right here in the United States.
Dallas, Texas.
No. You're clueless?
Should I guess it?
You can.
Did I already guess it earlier when I asked? Is it Appalachia?
No. It is Mt Shasta.
Oh, better. No offense to all of our Appalachia fans out there. Everyone talks about Appalachia. Appalachia is cryptid haven.
Yeah.
I feel like Mount Shasta kind of gets forgotten sometimes when it comes to American paranormal topic. Oh, wow, Mount Shasta. Okay. Yeah, there is a lot coming out of Mount Shasta.
Oh, yeah. We are going to
a lot of missing person cases, which I think just adds to everything.
Yeah, so we're going to cover it all. Mount Shasta, also to the Native Americans known as White Mountain, is located in California's Trinity National Park and is over 14,000 feet in elevation. Each year, it attracts more than 26,000 people. And it's known to be one of the most sacred places on Earth. Now, those who live near it call it the Magical Mountain. Many locals believe this place to be a mystical place, and the site itself is the home to many mysterious stories. Now, on a clear day, Mount Shasta can be seen from over 100 miles away. This mountain is part of a 1,000-mile Cascade Range stretching from North California to British Columbia. It's one of the largest stratovolcanoes in the world. It's also part of volcanoes that encompass the Pacific Basin, notoriously known as the Ring of Fire.
It connects to that?
So it's actually a inactive volcano, but I mean, it could go off at any moment. Nobody ever knows.
It's interesting with volcanoes because they're always like, oh, it's not active. And it's like, it could literally be active whenever it wanted.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into some things here. Mount Shasta's legends have existed in every culture that has lived in the area. Some say it's sacred center of the earth, of even the universe. Others say it's the birthplace of life. But there is one thing in common between most tribes, as that you do not go above the tree line, because that is reserved for the sky people. Native American history of Mount Shasta is said to date back to 600 BC, and 2500 BC and suggested 9,000 years of Native American habitation. According to archaeologists, the oldest excavated human inhabitant in the area dates back to around 7,000 years ago. Some say even longer, some have said 10,000 years as well. It was roughly 5,000 years ago that the area was significantly inhabited, as shown by an excavation of human habitations in the surrounding area, including carvings found of your typical ancient dwellers in caves and things, but also in some of these drawings was what we consider to be known as sky people. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get through here. But first, I want to travel back, way, way back to the very beginning and talk about the legend of the Lemurians of Mount Shasta. Now, Lemuria is the name of a hypothetical lost land that sunk between the oceans, somewhere between the Indian and Pacific Oceans. During that period, an ancient and prehistoric people lived on the continent of Lemuria, which was also called Mu. This continent became the cradle of human civilization, a sort of Garden of Eden. And this is not technically referring to your biblical Garden of Eden. Most ancient records and tribes have a corresponding myth of a creation of man, and this usually does take place in some sort of Garden of Eden type area.
Just a fun side note for everyone to maybe think I'm crazy, but I fully believe and feel that in a past life, I was in Lemuria.
Oh, I love that. So you're really going to like this.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of information about Lemuria that I have, no pun intended, did a deep dive into, and I say deep dive because it's kind of watery. Anyway.
Now, I didn't get into, I'm not going to be covering anything about mermaids in this one, just so you know up front.
I know, you're not coming for my shtick.
No.
I'm going to find a way with the mermaids here.
I think if I got into Lemurians and mermaids, it would be so much information we'd never get to everything about Mount Shasta. It would just need to be an episode about Lemuria by itself.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that.
Maybe we will. I'm taking a look back thousands of years before when the magnetic waves began to move the Earth from east to west, thus bringing us a tremendous change to the land globally. The Lemurians were believed to have kept detailed records of this. As land masses changed and the continental shift took place, the area of Lemuria became submerged underwater. The surviving Lemurians remained in the area surrounding it, which is now known as Mount Shasta. Lemurians were very much like people today. They had public schools, medical doctors. They lived in big, airy homes. They cooked their food over fire or special sun ovens. They had public swimming pools and bathing pavilions, and they actually mingled freely. They didn't have any issue about nudity. They did believe in reincarnation, and they were not afraid of death and did not seek to prolong their lives. It was very customary for Lemurians to announce their passing to their loved ones and friends several days ahead of their actual death. Once they passed on, their bodies were placed on a sacred soil, and a type of lime-like mineral was used to disintegrate the remains without polluting the soil. Lemurians had very advanced technologies and capabilities of harnessing the forces of nature.
We did.
So, for example, they were able to propel their boats by extracting energy from a single stone. They also had airships that were powered by using the same technology.
An airplane.
Yeah. The Lemurians had solar-based power technologies. While we have been gradually expanding the use of this technology, the Lemurians were using it freely and on large scales throughout all of their communities. They were able to store the energy from the sun and use it at night for light, heating, and a source of energy for their equipment. By day, they use this for many things, including big machines that would move huge items, including stone and wood pieces.
Like with the pyramids.
And when we're talking about the Lemurians and this tectonic plate shift, let's take a look at where this information can also be found. In the 1899 book of A Dweller of Two Planets, which was published by Frederick Spencer Oliver, tells of a story that was discovered written on ancient Hindu tablets. And as the legend goes, over 1 million years ago, the Earth was ruled by the Atlanteans and the Lemurians. Like the Lemurians, Atlanteans had superior technology. During this time, Atlantis was the dominant culture. And for many years, for about 25,000 years ago, Atlantis became corrupt and wanted to rule over all the people of Earth. But the Lemurians were against the idea and wanted to be left alone. Because of this, Atlantis decided to go to war with the Lemurians. They fought for years, using devastating nuclear weapons, which was said to cause the tectonic plates in the Earth to become unstable and the magnetic poles to shift. Finally, a massive flood tore across the planet and destroyed the civilizations, killing over 60 million Lemurians. Many Atlanteans were killed as well. The survivors retreated to an underground city called Agartha, and the Lemurians fled to Mount Shasta and created Talos. Lemurians were even said to have ventured beyond their land on great ships to Africa and colonized the Nile River. There they became the originators of the ancient Egyptian civilizations. They had also traveled to what is modern-day Texas, Mexico, and the Yucatan in order to settle in these new lands. Those settlers are commonly known as Maya, and in fact, Maya was what Lemurians called themselves. Hence is where Lemurians became the precursors of the Mayan civilization, which of course was also one of the most advanced cultures in the world at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, although the presence of Lemurians has never been conclusively proven, there have been a number of sightings of strange people around the area of Mount Shasta that seem to disappear at will, which is an ability that was possessed by the Lemurians. They do tend to avoid attention, and when they do make the occasional purchase in a shop, they pay for the merchandise with gold nuggets, which I found to be kind of a hint that something is off. If somebody's handing you gold nuggets, you'd kind of be like, what are you doing? What is this?
Yeah, it's not like
very undercover. Yeah. It is said that the Lemurians lived in a complexity of tunnels beneath Mount Shasta. The Lemurian survivors of the lost continent of Lemuria lived in a hidden city called Talos beneath Mount Shasta. The city Talos is referred to as a city of light, and it has been said that the Lemurians lived in these complex tunnels that were filled with jeweled walls, furred carpet floors. They also had the ability to travel through time and connect with aliens. When seen on the surface of Mount Shasta, they are said to be wearing white robes, are 7 feet tall, with long hair, and wearing sandals. And it is still believed that the Lemurians are living on or within the mountain itself. Many believe that the Lemurians and Atlantis are just stories and have for hundreds of years now. However, you probably know more about these than me. The recent discoveries of Bimini Road.
Oh, yeah, in the ocean.
In the Bahamas, and Yonaguni Monument off the coast of Japan. Hopefully I am saying that right.
That's a hard one.
Yeah.
That place, just to clarify, that place, the one off of Japan, is, I don't know if you've seen images of it, but it is blocks, staircases underwater, and scientists are like, this is a natural formation.
Yeah. A lot of skeptics do say that both of these areas look like natural formations. And
it makes no sense.
The Bimini Road looks to me like an actual brick road at the bottom of the sea.
For anyone out there who has not yet seen it, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's on Netflix. It's a docuseries. There are about, I think, 2 seasons officially. Ancient Apocalypse.
I have not. I just saw the images online.
Definitely everyone watch Ancient Apocalypse after you listen to this episode. It goes into detail about how back in the day we most likely, before the history that we know, that there were all these other civilizations that were wiped out due to a flood. And literally every ancient civilization has a story about a flood. All of them. All have a story about a flood. I think all of these lost civilizations were lost just into the ocean. So I think it all makes complete sense. And there's evidence. There's a lot of evidence, actually.
Yeah, I think it does too. And for a lot of this information to be written on Hindu tablets,
they knew what was up.
Yeah, you got to think about that land bridge that was available at the time and the plates shifting and moving these people in the different directions. To me, it makes sense.
Whatever it wants. Like,
yeah.
And also, I think if back in the day they were using some more natural based materials, those things would all disintegrate and disappear. So of course we would lose trace of them.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Anyway, go on. Back to sorry.
Now, Lemuria is one of the biggest legends about Mount Shasta. We've even had entire religions that have been built upon this idea. In the 1930s, Guy Ballard, a mining engineer, was exploring Mount Shasta. He claims he was met by a young man named Le Count de Saint Germain, which we have talked about before.
He was a vampire.
Yeah, so
in our New Orleans episode.
Exactly.
Not him coming through in both of our location episodes.
Yes. For those of you that don't know, Count Saint Germain is a well-known legend throughout paranormal history, and he claims to be immortal. He shows up during important historical events. There is even an encounter of him being at the signing of the Declaration of Independence, where he was said to have given a speech, which I thought that was interesting. I fact-checked that several times, and it came up in a lot of different articles, and I was like, I'm going with it. He was there.
He was documented to be a very real person, too.
Yeah.
We just don't know when he was born or died, so...
Exactly.
Vampire.
Ballard and his wife claimed that they are the sole messengers of Saint Germain. And they stated Saint Germain came to Ballard and gave him these ideas and this religion. And he started giving public lectures and even created the I Am Active movement with over 1 million followers. And then after Ballard died in 1971, many people left the religion, but it's still going on, and you can actually visit the I Am reading room in Shasta City. So not only do we have the legend of pretty much how the world separated and brought people over here and the mountains forming, and we have some vampire lore that brings us into a religion that is in Shasta City.
Mm-hmm.
Another great thing here is there may have been someone who stumbled upon Lemuria within the mountain. In 1904, J.C. Brown, who was a British prospector, discovered a lost underground city beneath Mount Shasta. Brown had been hired by Lord Conrad Mining Company of England to prospect for gold, and he claimed to have discovered a cave which sloped downwards for 11 miles. In the cave, he found an underground village filled with gold, shields, mummies, some being up to 10 feet tall. Brown described encountering a weird array of primitive machinery, which he attributed to subterranean mining operations, and also an unusual collection of gold treasures, relics belonging to unknown people who inhabited California in ancient times. I think I have an idea of who.
Lemurians.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was about to go with a type of alien.
Now, among the treasures Brown claimed to have found, he described as gold tablets and plates, all inscribed with strange hieroglyphics and handwriting, unusually tempered copper spears fashioned out of a memory metal alloy, which remembered its shape so that the spear could be bent to the point where the head of the weapon touched the base of the weapon, so it could morph back into its original state after this change. Brown also described a worship room containing statues that eerily glowed in the dark and depicted solar symbols. Unconventional crosses were all over the place, so not your modern day type of cross, which was suggestive of Mediterranean origin. In another chamber, he counted 27 giant skeletons laid out at angles within the walls, the smallest of which was around 6 feet 6 inches and the largest over 10 feet in height. In another chamber laid the bodies of a man and a woman dressed in royal robes, apparently mummified by some secret process. Brown believed them to be the king and queen of this lost race of prehistoric giants. After re-emerging to the surface, Brown reburied the tunnel, and the next decades of his life are still shrouded in mystery. He is believed to have returned to the site periodically over the years, but he also became increasingly paranoid and secretive. He claimed close family members and friends he shared his secret with attempted to betray him, and all of them died to a deadly curse or freak accidents and unnatural deaths. So we have some kind of pyramid curse things, it feels like, for the people
Ooh.
that betrayed him.
Or was he potentially schizophrenic and homicidal?
Doesn't seem that way, so.
Hopefully not.
So during the following years, Brown became obsessed with James Churchward's book, The Lost Continent of Mu, and was fascinated with the theories about Lemuria. Brown became assured that he had discovered evidence of the lost race of these prehistoric giants who inhabited California during ancient times. He believed that he had found this lost link to a story of civilizations who had been destroyed during this catastrophic flood. 30 years later, he told the story to John C. Root, who proceeded to gather an exploration team in Stockton, California. 80 people joined the team, but on the day the team was to set out, Brown did not show up, and Brown was never heard from again. Members of Brown's expedition suspected foul play and feared that their leader may have been kidnapped. The police were called into investigation.
Because he's getting on to something?
Perhaps. The police were called into investigation, but could not find any cause for the reason for Brown's weird disappearance, or that it was even a hoax, as he had never accepted any money from any members of his party. Some say secret society learned of his discovery and took him out. Others are convinced, though, that he no longer needed a search party to go back to the tunnels, but had been granted access and taken there by some sort of machine or vehicle, and that this description of this vehicle highly resembles to what we know of as a UFO today.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. J.C. Brown appeared to be the last person to succumb to the treasure's deadly curse, and ever since he discovered the giant tunnel, the whole ordeal brought him nothing but trouble through his life. Now, Lemurians aren't the only unusual figures said to have inhabited this standalone semi-active volcano. Mount Shasta is considered to be a safe place for lizard people, angels, aliens, and other mystical creatures. Even Bigfoot has been spotted in this area, as well as portals. Just about, like I said, every type of paranormal occurrence that you can think of, Mount Shasta has it. Ancient Indian tribes that have occupied these mountains have described gods that would also walk the lands of the mountains, and we briefly mentioned the sky people in the intro. Well, a theory is, what if the sky people aren't what you think as beings in the sky, but if they're actually here on Earth, just not human? There are Native American legends that describe a race of giants that lived on Mount Shasta known as Motagami, which translates to Bigfoot, and are said to be the keepers of the woods. And it's very similar to Metogami, which is the Tibet word for Yeti, which if we look at what we've already talked in regards to the land breach in India and America, the plates and everything, it makes sense. And to me, it rises theory of, well, why do we have Bigfoots in America? Why do we have Yetis over in Asian countries? Why does every place around the world have similar cryptids in some way and similar stories of these creatures throughout their history?
Yeah, just like how every ancient civilization has a horned god, a mermaid, or all of these creatures.
Yes, and if we think about
something.
Yeah, and if we think about the Earth being one massive continent, and then that breaking up and everything flooding and being dispersed to all these places, it could make sense.
Yeah.
Since the 1920s, people have reported these large creatures in the woods. In 1976, a camper thought it was a ranger who was out in his camp investigating the area, but as he observed the figure, he was shocked to see what he was looking at and what he described to be as a Bigfoot. Now, the next one is wild, but I'm going to include it.
Okay.
In 1962, a hiker claimed to have actually seen a female Bigfoot giving birth.
I've heard of that one.
Yes, and
I know this one.
This one's at Mount Shasta. I guess if all the places in the world, if you're going to be able to encounter Bigfoot giving birth, Mount Shasta's got to be the place. It just has to. In 1930, a humanoid skeleton was reportedly found near Mount Shasta as well. And we've been discussing these giants, and this was a very large humanoid skeleton that was found. So some people do believe that they are actually encountering a Bigfoot, but also some do believe that they are actually encountering the Lemurians themselves. Could be a disguise.
Like the Lemurians are disguising themselves as Sasquatch?
Maybe.
Like they put on a...
Or they're shape-shifting, who knows?
Or they've hired the Sasquatches
to go out and bring back resources.
Yeah, and to kind of guard. They're scary.
Yeah, could be. Now, going into UFOs here. UFO sightings have occurred over hundreds of years, and in recent years have picked up. Of the top 300 UFO hotspots all over the world, Shasta ranks 13th.
What's number one?
I didn't look into that.
Oh.
I was on a roll with this. I couldn't stop. UFOs have been spotted hovering above roads, swarming the peak of the mountain, and then disappearing. The most reported sighting happened in 2008 that resembled that of a giant glowing jellyfish with what appeared to be a fire raging inside of it. Later years, someone captured the same jellyfish UFO encounter on video in the same area. So the first time we didn't have any video recording or evidence, but recently we do.
Okay.
And these sightings are a bit different, as people claim to see them flying into the mountain, not an opening. It just vanishes into the rock of the mountain.
Ooh, like a ghost.
Mm-hmm. And it is thought that Mount Shasta could be harvesting a powerful energy vortex that allows access into other dimensions.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Yes. It is as if that UFO is hiding in the clouds before gaining access to the portal and disappearing into the mountains itself. There have been many witnesses that claim to have seen strange beings in the caves that have the same ability to walk into walls and vanish. But if we're going to talk about portals, there's going to be some people that call bullshit. So I wanted to dive into some points about portals and how 2 points in space can be joined by nothing but energy.
Yes, literally portals exist, everyone.
Yes. If we go into it here, in 2013, NASA discovered a phenomenon which is called an X-point. So an X-point is a place where the magnetic fields of the Earth is directly connected to the magnetic fields of the Sun. This is an uninterrupted path of energetic particles leading from our planet to the Sun, 93 million miles away through space. Another study was done and confirmed that some of these portals are short-lived and can open and close very quickly, but some are stable for long periods of time. And we cannot use these people supposedly yet as points of travel. But there is science to support that the Earth is magnetically tethered to the Sun. And the magnetism around Mount Shasta is highly unusual. The entire area is covered by an enormous negative magnetic anomaly. So could this strong magnetism be causing ruptures in space that could possibly be causing people to disappear as well?
Yes.
I believe so.
I think the same with Appalachia.
Mm-hmm.
I think the same with, I can't think of any other specific places. There are definitely other places that I can think of. Oh, Bermuda Triangle. Oh, and there's one in Asia. Mm-hmm. That's like the Asian version of the Bermuda Triangle called the Devil's something.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that is very, very, very possible. I mean, literally look at wormholes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who's to say we don't have a wormhole coming through Earth? And that's why all these things are just like being kind of dumped here. And then they vanish.
Yeah. They're just coming in and out. I believe it.
Are you tapping?
No.
Did you hear that?
Well, I probably will in editing.
Okay. So if you leave that in, everyone, we have something coming through a portal.
I suppose. When is something not happening when we're recording?
Yeah.
Literally every time. You'll find so many Easter eggs that we leave that we do not talk about. Or we edit out and we just leave the little Easter egg for you guys. So
yeah, now we're getting haunted.
Well, Well, my house on a Tuesday. So, if there is some kind of electromagnetic event, of course, I think that Mount Shasta is going to be one of the major places that qualify on Earth for this to take place. And like I said, it's not just beings that disappear at Mount Shasta. It is also one of the most active areas in the U.S. for strange disappearances. There are a lot of people that just vanish with no explanation at all. So I thought, in order to tie the past and the present all together, I'm going to go over 3 cases of mysterious vanishings on Mount Shasta. And I think the last one that we discuss will also bring us back full circle to perhaps the Lemurians. We'll see what you think about it.
Okay. So we're getting paranormal, conspiracy, and
yes,
like a true crime.
You can't leave out the missing people. It just kind of brings it all together.
Solidify things for skeptics.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about the legends and the lore and UFOs and, mysterious beings disappearing and UFOs flying into it. But I think it really hits home when you hear it happening to humans themselves, us, mysterious disappearances on this mountain. So I'm going to discuss 3, like I said. The first one we're going to start with is Billy Coleman. Now, this takes place in 1940, and while it didn't happen on Mount Shasta, it happened 70 miles from Mount Shasta, but it is exactly the same area. It's part of the same mountain range. 14-year-old Billy Coleman, who lived with his parents in a cabin at the foot of the mountains at an elevation around 4,000 feet, which is just above the snow line, and during this time it was the Christmas of 1939. The family had invited their extended family and some of Billy's friends to come stay with them for the holidays. During this time, however, Billy had been ill and he had had the flu, but he was recovering and feeling much better, but not at that 100% yet. You know how like that day after you start feeling a little bit better and you get energetic, but then like an hour, you're like, oh my God, I got to lie down. It's like, I feel like I'm getting sick again.
Yeah.
We all know how that feels. On January 1st, 1940, Billy was outside playing by the side of the house by a tree. His mother could see him and started doing some errands around the house. When she returned a couple minutes later, he was no longer there. She went out and couldn't find him and very quickly reported this. A team of nearly 500 people set out on search for Billy.
Wow.
They marked off a 12-mile square area. They found some scattered tracks by a creek, and the creek was searched and no body was found. The tracks, however, appeared to be aimlessly wandering out and around from the creek and then just disappeared.
No.
After a time, Billy's clothes were found a week after his disappearance at a creek. This included his overalls and underwear. And there is no way to tell when Billy made this way to the creek, how or why. Because
that is just like so many of the missing 411 cases where the kid goes missing and their clothes are found in the exact same place that the search team had already looked. There are multiple cases where the clothes are found folded.
Yes, I came across several of those as well. Very bizarre. Now, this creek where his clothes were found was only 250 yards away from the cabin. So the creek was so close to the family's home. Of course, this would have been a place that he played frequently. And you've got 500 people out there looking for him, and they don't find the clothes until a week later. There is an assumption that he went to the creek and then suffered from hypothermia, and he could have been disoriented as the temperatures of the time would have been minus 13 degrees. But to me, the question is, if he already wasn't feeling that well, why would he travel down to the creek? What led him to travel down to the creek? Why wouldn't he not just have traveled back home? Why did he strip down and leave his overalls and underwear at the creek? And how did his snow footprints just disappear into nowhere? And like I said, why did it take a whole week for his clothes to be discovered in this close proximity to his home? Because his clothes weren't found until the 8th in this area that had already been searched. And there's no way he could have wandered around for a week like this without any clothes. And even if it was hypothermia was a factor, it still doesn't explain everything. There was no body found. His tracks just stopped. If an animal would have got him, animals do not just grab you and cleanly walk away quietly.
Animals also leave tracks.
And there will be mess.
Yeah, there would be blood. There would be something. And the clothes were found, like you said. Animals don't disrobe victims.
No, they're not like, now take off your overalls and underwear.
No. And if they are doing something like that, I guess, then they're shredding it.
Yes.
Like, those clothes would be just destroyed and covered in blood.
Exactly. And I mean, if he was confused, he shouldn't have even been able to get that far from the creek at all. If you're suffering from hypothermia, you get groggy and weak, and it doesn't allow you to aimlessly wander for hours. He would have not been able to get too far in that state. And if he was suffering from hyperthermia alone, he should have been found, like I said, rather quickly, right there in that area.
Yeah, especially if he was already kind of sick, he probably would have
collapsed
and stopped. He probably would have died.
Yeah.
And they would have found his body very easily.
Yeah. The fact that nobody found him, there was never any leads or anything. Now, on January 13th of 1940, a Daily News reported that after going on a hunt on horseback near that area, Mr. Coleman was convinced that he had actually seen his son in the woods. He thought maybe he was taken there by an automobile, but there's just not any support to that theory, given that his clothes were found already. It would have been impossible for him to make it that many miles away. And also, there was no evidence of a vehicle. There was no other footprints, no evidence that somebody would have. You got to think about it. If he was forcefully taken and put in a car, they made him take his clothes off first. It doesn't make sense.
No, it does not.
Well,
unless it was staged by someone who was at the house.
And
even then, I would think, how did they not leave tracks?
They would have left tracks to and from the house.
Yeah, and where did they keep the clothes until they'd place them outside? I don't know.
It just doesn't make sense. Well,
alien abduction.
Yeah. After 80 years to this day, Billy Coleman or any other traces of him have never been found. So completely disappeared off the face of the earth.
Creepy.
Now, this next one really gets me. This next one's a lot creepier to me.
These missing, I guess this would be considered missing 411?
Yes, they are.
Oh, they are? Okay.
Yeah.
Missing 411 cases are one of the few things, especially with true crime, that actually terrifies me.
Yeah.
Me too. I don't know why. There's just such a weird energy to it. The thing that, they're all connected. There's always some kind of similarity between the cases that's just something's going on.
Oh, yeah, definitely. They do have to share certain characteristics, and those characteristics include body location, state of remains, point of separation, victim identity, and natural features of the location. And what I found very interesting was miscellaneously, there is a high proportion of missing people that have German descent.
Yes, I know. Why Germans?
I have no idea. And they mostly tend to be male, not in their prime, very high or low intelligency, usually white. Some cases, disabilities contribute to the factor, but usually someone who fits this is a part of your 411 cases. I mean, it doesn't always have to be like that. I mean, you don't have to be a male in your late 50s who's intelligent or vice versa. It just kind of is part of the criteria there, which of course I found that because I was starting to do missing 411, discovered that was a rabbit hole that I needed much more time to dive into for sure. But we're going to continue and we're going to talk about Carl Landers. Have you heard about Carl Landers?
No.
Okay. Well, as earlier, of course, we touched on the Native Americans and the surrounding areas who viewed the mountains as holy ground. And with that being said, they also thought that no ordinary man or woman should be able to climb the mountain because its energy was too powerful. It has always been said that it could be inhabited by dangerous spirits and guardians who would harm humans trying to climb this mountain. if they're not prepared. And it used to be that normal people were not even allowed to climb Mount Shasta. So let's take a look at Carl Landers, a climber of Mount Shasta. Carl Landers was 69 years old. He was a distance runner and was described to be in really good shape. Climber and hiker, and he even was a runner in the Boston Marathon, which is over 23 miles, and he finished in 5 hours and 30 minutes. The average time, fun fact, is 3 hours and 45 minutes. So not too bad for 69-year-old Carl here.
Yeah.
Now, in May of 1998, Carl had an ambition to climb Mount Shasta. The first time he went out, this climb, he just couldn't make it to the top, and he had to retreat back down, but he made this goal that he would climb this mountain. The night before his hike, he went with 2 friends, Barry and Milt. They stayed together in a hotel and got up around 4 a.m. to head out for their climb. They had layered clothing, all the equipment for climbing, and food and water. This was not the first time that they had climbed a mountain. They were very prepared. They knew what they were doing. They started this hike at Bunny Flat Trailhead, which at the time was covered in snow. From that point, they hiked 4 miles to a place called Horse Camp, where they would spend the night. The next day, they traveled to campsite 50-50 Plateau, and this is where they would camp before they would make their way to the top of the mountain. At the time of this hike, Carl was taking a medication to help him with altitude. And he was experiencing some nasty side effects from the medication and having quite bad stomach issues, which led him to going in and out of the tent several times during the middle of the night in this freezing cold snow.
Every single second of what you just said sounds like hell.
It does. It's freezing. He has to go shit out in the wilderness every other second. Tent? And in a tent.
And it's what, like 5 a.m.?
Yeah. Now,
yuck.
I know this does not sound like anything that I would have ambition to do in life.
No, I'm not doing that.
No. Now, the morning of May 25th, 1999, Carl said he was still not feeling good. He decided to leave the campsite without his friends and started heading towards Lake Helen. And this lake wasn't far. He was fully dressed in gear and he was ready to go despite not feeling well. He was determined to do
Good
this.
for him.
Yeah, well, maybe. Now, the plan was for him to hike over to the area where the mountain ranger would be for them to check in. And he was going to rest up a bit before his friends made it over, and they would then take the adventure up the side of that mountain. About 30 minutes after he left, Barry went back to his tent because now he wasn't feeling well. And the other friend, Milt, went out on his own. When he got to the place where they were supposed to meet up, he asked the mountain ranger if Carl had been by. The ranger had no idea who he was talking about. He did say that he saw one person that morning, so Milt saw them. He could see them in the distance slightly, and he tried to catch up. But he realized that the person was going way too fast to be Carl. So he turned back, went back down and asked the ranger again, but the ranger still replied, no Carl, nobody else has been through here except that hiker there. Now, he went back to the camp thinking that Carl would be there, but by 5 p.m. when he got back there, he saw Barry, but there was no Carl. By 8 p.m. that evening, they went back to the bunny trail where they first started off to alert the county sheriff that Carl was missing. The morning the search began, they used grid patterns, helicopters with infrared, search with U.S. Forest Rangers, volunteers, sniffer dogs. I mean, wow. They covered this mountain. And this area that they are in, you can see straight across. There's no bushes. There's no forest. There's nothing to where you can just disappear. With all of this, there was no signs of Carl anywhere. None of his personal belongings, nothing, no footprints in the snow, no evidence that he had even been on the mountain. Now, the search was led by a man named Grizz Adams. He said that in 35 years, he's never had this happen, as this trail was one of the easier trails to hike.
Whoa.
The trail itself is barren, like I said. You can literally see all around you clearly and ahead of you. He stated, that they were all over that mountain. Canines couldn't find a trace. They dropped men at the summit that came all the way down the side of the mountain like ants, all over this mountain. They talked to people who were on the mountain and no one saw them. When asked about what he thought happened on that mountain, he said that's the $1 million question. He either went up or in, but he's not on it.
Up or in? Up like...
in the sky. He whether up.
That's literally what this guy that led the search said?
Mm-hmm. But he's not on the mountain.
Up or in.
Yep, like up in the sky. He was either like abducted or taken into the mountain. And this mountain doesn't have like, this area doesn't have like craters or things that you can like fall into, or it's a very, like I said, they're not young men anymore. They were taking a very easy path. It's very visible, everything around them. He wouldn't have been able to just fall in a hole, fall in a crater. They missed him. So very odd that that guy even said that he either went up or he's in that mountain. And now it is believed that he went missing somewhere between the campsite and Lake Helen, but there were no tracks going anywhere off that trail. There aren't any crevices or craters, like I said. No dense forest, shrubs, nothing for him to get lost in. When we're going into some theories here, first of all, we know he wasn't feeling well. He was taking meds for the altitude sickness. Some of the side effects included were nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, tiredness, confusion, and increased urination. So with a combination of the side effects from the medicine, some people think he became extremely dehydrated. And with the thin air from the altitude caused low blood pressure, which could have made him disoriented, and that he could have hiked towards the lake, gotten lost. He could have gone the complete wrong way and not even on the trail. However, like I said, this route was relatively easy. It was the safest trail. And there was no more like taking a walk on the snow rather than a steep hike up the mountain. And he was an experienced hiker. This was a popular area to hike, so it would have been impossible if he would have passed out and or died of hyperthermia or something, because he did get sick and passed out from dehydration in that very short time span from the tent to the lake. Because remember, his friend went the same area, didn't see him laying there. The next theory is a stranger or an animal attacked him, but there's also no evidence other than that he just disappeared. There's no tracks were found, no evidence of an animal attack. And again, this was a very popular trail. It would have been hard for someone not to notice.
Someone would have seen him being abducted by a stranger or attacked by an animal.
Exactly. Now, the next theory, now this one is interesting, but I can't fully get into this. The next theory could have been that his friends harmed him, that they had an intent to lure him out on this trip and lied about the entire situation. And it could have been a cover for what they did when he was sick, going in and out of his tent. They could have been the ones trooping in and out of that tent, making sure that the body was hidden and that the diarrhea was just an excuse for all of that trackage and everything. And them asking the mountain ranger if he had walked by was kind of a well-hidden way to, act like they weren't involved. But
yeah,
it still would be pretty difficult for two older men to carry an entire body and not be seen or heard by anyone, hide him that well, and all of his personal belongings, because you got to think of how much crap you have on yourself when you're hiking up these mountains in the cold. You're wearing a lot of winter gear. Some people say it's possible that they did something to him before the trip had even happened. And they went on this trip as an alibi for them. And he disappeared mysterious.
Oh, like he was never there at all?
Yeah, but people saw him. It would have been odd that, no, if that would have been the case if nobody saw him. But they had gone through a couple different checkpoints by that time. And also his family and friends didn't say anything about him not going on this trip. So if it was a fake trip, I mean, it's kind of odd there. Now, mystical theories. The mountain has had this mystical history and, of course, is haunted by spirits. Some people believe that's what happened to Carl. Considering from alien visitors to underground advanced civilizations, like we said, if You can imagine it. Someone has probably encountered it in the slopes of Mount Shasta. So, and to this day, no Carl. He's never been found. None of his equipment, his jacket, nothing. He is lost within the mountain. Any thoughts or anything on poor Carl?
Like the potential foul play from his friends, I'm like, well, maybe, but I don't know. I feel like I would need more information about that. Like, what was their motive?
Yeah.
Before I even talk about that theory. I don't know.
I feel like I would have seen a lot more evidence of that theory if it was something that even the rangers or police or anything were investigating at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, Carl's tent and all this stuff was all packed up. There was evidence it was there. Where did all this equipment go? You got to think of like his tent, all of his belongings, everything that he was carrying with him, his food, his supplies, tactical gear, winter gear. Like there was evidence that Carl was on that mountain. So it's kind of like where would, even if they didn't bring Carl and let's say they brought an extra tent, things like that, like nothing was found. And this is a pretty barren area. So they would have at least found, even if they packed up the tent neatly, there's not a bush or a tree they could go hide things in. I mean, maybe they could have buried it in the snow. Who knows? But I just feel like that's very elaborate. And what did they have against Carl? Why would they go through all this trouble to kill Carl? Yeah, I don't know. He seemed like a pretty cool dude. And why would two friends do it, not just one? I mean, they both would have really had to have some vendetta on this dude to really like mastermind this plan. It just seems like a lot to me.
Yeah, it is kind of a dramatic, drawn out way to try to take someone out. Very. Especially if you don't, it's not guaranteed to work. Like you could very easily get caught on that trail. If they were doing it in like the Pacific Northwest at a national park, that would make a little more sense because it's so wooded.
Yeah, you could easily hide a body.
Yeah, where you're talking about being kind of barren and you can see all around.
And they're hikers. They've been to several different areas, not just Mount Shasta. If they wanted to kill him and they are really going through this much of an elaborate plan, take him to Appalachian. Like, why take him to Mount Shasta? And they've been there before. They know the conditions and what it looked like. To me, it makes no sense. And also, if they would have killed him before they ever even went to the mountain, we never found a body anywhere else that showed up. Like nobody ever stumbled upon a body in a dumpster or anything. I don't know if these two old men really had the capability of going to all those lengths. It doesn't make sense. But the next story really doesn't make sense. So this is the strangest of the three. And this one I think will loop us all the way back around to the Lemurians on just some key things that occurred during this. So,
okay.
This next one we are going to talk about 3-year-old Indiana Pitts. This strange occurrence took place on Friday, September 2nd of 2011 at Fowler's Campground at Mount Cloud Falls, just downhill from Mount Shasta. 3-year-old Indiana Pitts had been playing with his sister and other children that evening. Indiana wandered away from the group when someone yelled "rattlesnake" real loud, which scared the crap out of him and the other children as well. They all kind of dispersed and most of the children returned back to the camp. At approximately 6 p.m. is when he disappeared. The parents searched for their son for about 15 minutes before contacting the local sheriff and the United States Forest Service. Then around 7 p.m., deputies tried to speak to the mother, but of course, she was crying. She was absolutely unable to speak. The father, however, said that they were camping and having a family reunion at the campground and told him that he did not return with the other children that evening. Local news outlets said that within 45 minutes of the missing report, around 100 people, including officers, firefighters, and locals, showed up to assist. The campground was thoroughly searched, including every campsite, tent, and vehicle in the area. An extensive grid search was set up and roadblocks were set up to ensure that nobody would exit the campground or come in. There was a set of child footprints that were found along the shoreline upstream from the campsite and a single set of small prints with the shoes on the wrong feet. The canine teams were deployed to find whoever had made those track prints. Darkness was setting in, but the search did not let up. Anyone who knew that forest did not think they were going to find this young boy alive. As the night grew longer and darker, some worried that the young child had been swept up by the river and pulled under by the water's undercurrent. They had actually set up at the very end catchers just in case, so that if the body floated down, they'd be able to catch it. They began to search the river's waters, while others combated the bushy areas around. But miraculously, with the help of a canine partner, approximately 5 hours after he went missing, he was found laying in a thicket directly next to the trail that the searchers had been using.
Like where like they would have seen him?
Yeah.
Of course.
The boy was found hiding in the bush at 11:45 a.m. He was found a mile up the trail. It was past dark by this time that he was found, and if he hadn't been in that bush, he could have easily been attacked by an animal in this area at that time of night. He was cold and very frightened, but in good condition. He only told the deputies that he had just got lost, and he was never questioned by authorities. The story was a huge success, and local news report covered it extensively, and nearby McCloud River Lodge offered free hot meals to everyone who participated in the community. It was a very big, yay, we found this boy. Now, this is where things get strange. About 3 weeks after the incident, the boy was playing on his grandmother's porch. When his grandmother says her grandson told her that he didn't like the other grandma, Cappy. Now, Cappy is what the boy nicknamed for his grandmother, Kathy. When she asked him to explain further, saying, "What do you mean I'm the only grandma, Cappy?" Now, as we go into this encounter that he talks about, keep in mind, Indiana is 3 years old. So a lot of times children don't have the words to describe things. They will use something that relates to it close enough to describe the things to the best of their knowledge. So kind of keep that in mind. So he said, "Do you remember when I was lost in the woods? The other grandma, Cappy, grabbed me and took me to a creepy place. She's really a robot." Kathy thought at first this was just the imagination, but she did ask the boy to, continue telling her about this. He said it was a cave with spiders, and there were purses and guns, and they were on a shelf and dirty. I was too scared, so I didn't touch anything. But when she climbed a ladder, the light made her look like a robot. She sparkled all around her. There were other robots too, but they didn't move. She made me lay down to look at my tummy. Then she tried to get me to poop on sticky paper, but I couldn't go. She told me that I am from outer space, and they put me in my mommy's tummy. She then took me back to the river and said to wait under the bush until someone found me. So this was the encounter that the 3-year-old is giving. So like I said, there's some things, like he may not know how to explain how the woman looked, but he may know what a robot on TV looks like. So things, he's not going to have the proper details. And I tried to poop on sticky paper. That could have been the only way that he could have described whatever was going on there. But to me, there could be a lot more there if he was older. But of course, most people that disappear aren't found. So maybe
I've actually heard that one.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah, when you said the thing about the 2 grandmas, that sparked it. Yeah.
Now, it gets more interesting, though, because, of course, she called her son to ask what the child had been watching, and she told him the story, and he said that he had told him the same story a few days ago, and that's just a child's imagination. He's got a big imagination. She also states that her grandson said she had your same hair, your feet, and even your face, which this really scared her deeply, the idea of some doppelganger taking on her own image to abduct her grandson. She says that she got the impression that her grandson may have been talking to a hologram because of the way he described the light sparkling around the strange woman. His grandmother was horrified, of course. She admitted that she would have probably written off this as a story of a child's overactive imagination if it wasn't for the strange experience that happened to her a year before her grandson went missing. When she was camping in the same area near Fowler's campground in Mt Cloud, California, she claims she woke up in the morning face down in the dirt, having been removed from her tent and sleeping bag. and she had a puncture wound on the back of her head. She said she felt violently ill that morning and felt strangely emotionless. So she thought maybe she had been bit by a poisonous spider. She said she was with a friend who had been sleeping in a separate camper, and he also woke up with a bite on the back of his neck and felt ill as well. She said afterwards it took a long time to feel normal, and she had no creativity and no emotions. The only thing strange that she could recall that night was seeing red eyes shining through the trees in their flashlights, which, of course, they thought were maybe deer, some kind of wildlife, but she did recall...
Deer with red eyes?
You know how people always try to explain things.
Probably a weather balloon.
That crane.
Oh,
the crane.
What was that from?
Mothman and a couple of others, too. It's always a crane or an owl. It was a barn owl.
Barn owl for Flatwoods.
Yeah. Now, she also recalled that this was weird because they never saw any wildlife. She distinctly remembers no insects, butterflies, bees, which is very normal for this area. And that 2 birds that they thought were crows flew up and sat in a tree and watched them. And for some reason, this made them feel very creeped out and uncomfortable. So she also stated that she did not want to ask her grandson about the incident again, because she didn't want to create false memories. You know, with little kids, they keep repeating it, and now all of a sudden they remember everything. So she waited a year before asking him what had happened. He repeated the same story. She said she has never been back to look for the cave and wouldn't unless she had practically an army with her. Now, she believes he was examined by someone or something, and she states she doesn't know who or what and believes there's more going on in this forest than discussed. Now, she did share this information to the sheriff just so that he kind of had it in case somebody else went missing or something, and they've got this bizarre story. Now, a lot of this story is something that was found on a forum. This woman went on a forum after these events happened and claimed she was Grandma Cappy. Okay. Well, for a long time, there's been much skepticism about this being told only on a forum. And it gave really a whole lot of doubt to, was this actually the real Grandma Cappy, the real person who had this grandson, the missing person incident, all that actually happened. But however, in 2020, a TV show, Into the Unknown, aired on the History Channel. And before it aired, on this forum, the original poster of Grandma Cappy announced that they would be on this show. So it kind of brings in all of this information now that we have, oh crap, it's a real person. And this show does air. It interviews the family, Kathy, Indiana, and his sister. And like I said, until the show aired, we really didn't have any names or faces to this encounter. It was always known as the boy was John Doe, things like this. And again, a lot of people didn't believe this because they're like, how are we to say that this person is really that little boy's grandma? Well, because she went back on the same forum, everything was the same. She said, hey, we're going to be on this show. And then they were. So, some people can still be skeptics about, but I think it kind of draws it all together as a more believable story. But the things that got me when this little boy was talking about the items on these shelves, and as we talked about when that one cave was discovered, all those items that were everywhere. Also, the robots that weren't moving. Could he have been talking about mummies?
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So he thought, I get it. Okay.
Perhaps.
Yeah, maybe the way that they were mummified had maybe something metallic.
Maybe.
And maybe that's why he assumed robot.
Now, he said that they were robotic. Well, even in the interview, I think he's much older. He looks to be maybe 10, 11 years old in this interview in 2020.
9 years.
Now, he does talk about they had this like glowing effect to them. And so did the old woman. And that kind of makes me think of the Lemurians. I mean, if she's having this glowing effect, we've heard that kind of described about them and their long hair and all these things and the way they can walk through walls, all these things that the Lemurians can do, and they're supposedly living in these mountains. Could it have been to me that maybe he was taken in by one of these Lemurians? And I mean, if the Lemurians are corresponding with aliens and things like that, could it all be connected to this ancient civilization, to why everything is happening around this mountain and being drawn to the mountain as well? I don't know. I just feel like it's all, the more you look into it, because I've read over this about 1,000 times, it just, more pieces of the puzzle just keep coming back to me of like, oh yeah, and oh yeah. And also, if he saw these guns and purses, could these have also been from lost or missing people?
That's what I was wondering, if maybe, was it, I mean, we don't know how many guns, I guess, but.
He said they were all dusty on a shelf. Very strange.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't think of what I could imagine it to be otherwise, or what he would be thinking it is, or like what he thinks are guns, you know.
But anyways, that's all I have. Any discussion?
I actually had a family member who, I don't know if he believed in the people of Mount Shasta, or if he just talked and wrote about it, and or had friends that believed in it. But I guess he was an uncle, great uncle, and he actually had a book about werewolves, like Romanian werewolf lore. He was friends with all these shamans and talked about the people that lived in Mount Shasta, which is where I learned the Shasta lore, actually.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And fun fact, Mount Shasta, so I don't know if you're familiar with this, but so you know how like humans have the chakra system?
Mm-hmm.
And we have the 7 main chakras, the energy points in our body. The earth supposedly also has 7 chakras. And the root chakra, the base one, is actually Mount Shasta.
Oh, very interesting.
Which you brought up in the beginning, that people theorize that Shasta is actually where like all of Earth's origins come from. Like that's the birthplace, that it's also the center of the earth energetically, which would make sense if you look at it from the chakra standpoint, that it all starts there.
Yeah. And not for anybody to get confused, we're not talking about this being the United States as it is currently being where Earth, because a lot of people think the origins of they still think of the map that we have today, and a lot of religions still go by the current map when mapping out where origins were. We're talking about before.
Real ones.
Well, we won't say that because a lot of people do have different beliefs, but when we're talking about this, we're talking about Shasta would have been part of that big chunk before the big divide and everything split up and became what the United States is currently. So I just don't want anybody to think, oh, they're over here saying that the birthplace of the world is right in California. Not that kind of California. It would have been
not California
at the time. Exactly.
What do you think about Shasta?
Well, I have been diving down this rabbit hole for 2 days straight, from like 5 o'clock till maybe around 1 or 2 o'clock every night. So several hours. I really got into this. It's hard after doing that much research not to say, I believe it.
Yeah.
You know me, though.
Yeah.
You could tell me they saw depictions of Elvis Presley on the moon and they believe his ghost lives there. And I'd be like, I believe it, man.
I know.
I believe it.
I wish Elvis was on the moon.
Actually, I think he's still alive, and he's an old man that's a preacher right now, and there's a lot of evidence.
I think he'd be dead now.
Oh, there's actually a lot of evidence that he is this one guy. I think maybe that's something you might want to cover, especially if you know nothing about it.
Okay.
It is fascinating, all the pieces of the puzzle that really, and I'm like, oh.
I think you should cover that because you already have the info on Michael Jackson. You're all up in that rabbit hole.
I know.
You could do an episode about celebrities not really dying.
We could. That would be a good one.
I don't know who else there's. Elvis, Michael. You could just do the two. I don't know.
Yeah.
The two kings.
Yeah, the two kings. Are they dead or are they alive?
There's one creature or entity that you didn't talk about from Shasta, and it's the shadow beings.
Oh, I didn't come across shadow being information.
You didn't?
Maybe you can enlighten us here towards the end of this.
I don't know too much about them, but that's one thing that people claim to see is shadowy people on the mountain. And if I'm thinking of it correctly, people who live there are like, don't acknowledge them. Oh, and these people who walk around in dark cloaks, not the Lemurians and the white ones.
Yeah.
People like hooded figures, like Dementors from Harry Potter, but not flying around. So maybe those are some of the spookier people hanging out in Mount Shasta. I want to go to Mount Shasta.
No.
Bad.
You can go.
You wouldn't go?
With all the people that disappear and all the crazy.
Well, I'm not going up it. I'm not hiking it. I'm doing anything crazy.
Well, the little boy, remember, he disappeared in the park. They didn't go on a hike. The other people lived at a cabin at a pretty relevant elevation. There's also one story I didn't cover because it really didn't go that far, but it was our first young boy that disappeared by the creek. There was another happened not too far away in one of the towns there, and he had some mental illness and stuff, so it's hard to say whether or not things happen on their own accord, but it was very odd that his tracks went out to this creek, a place that he would not have wandered to. He had some disabilities and things like that, but again, his tracks just stopped abruptly at this creek. He was never found. No evidence that he jumped into the creek. No evidence that if he ran away, he would have needed his medication. He was on a lot of medication, but never found. I didn't cover it. I mean, that's basically the whole story. So when I got done researching it, I was like, oh, well.
There's a bonus.
Yeah, but it just correlates very closely to the first incident that we heard of in the same area. And I think it wasn't that long after the first kid disappeared that happened as well.
See, the Mount Shasta missing 411 stuff to me feels different than the other missing 411s. And I only say that because the other ones to me, well, the other ones don't seem to come with creatures and UFO sightings.
Yeah.
And weird ancient lore for the area. Maybe in Appalachia.
Yeah.
So maybe if there's missing persons there. But most of them seem to be in places that don't have weird lore or cryptids that we know of. And I do believe that for the 411 missing person situation, most of it is human trafficking. And I think the government allows for a certain number of people to be trafficked a year. And that's why there's no database. That's why these search parties will turn up literally nothing. That's why a lot of the times they're children. That's why they will be found naked or their clothes will be found. Or the kids who have survived and are found, they'll talk about being with a big person or something. It's,
yeah.
I feel like most of it is human trafficking and our government is 1000% involved. And maybe with the Germans, maybe for some reason, Germans are like really drawn to our national parks.
I don't know.
It's probably easy for the government to allow for a foreigner to go missing, I would assume. But I don't think that Mount Shasta is that. Like, I don't think that it's the same situation.
Yeah. The reason I even came up with Mount Shasta is because I was looking into so many 401 missing person cases. And the ones from Mount Shasta just really stuck out different than the other ones. And to go with where you are with the human trafficking, there was one that I found, and it's not in Mount Shasta. I can't remember exactly where it was, where a little boy went missing on a hike with a whole group of people. And years later, his clothes were found. His sneakers were perfectly clean and white.
Oh, yeah.
But also, the sheriff's department gave this family the most difficult times of their life while searching for this boy. The sheriff's department literally tried to do everything in their power to make this whatever. They threatened to arrest the parents if they came back on the property where they had set up a camp for everybody to, when you're searching, everybody meets back at this point. They would not allow the parents to come in and search for their own child. They threatened to arrest them. They made threatening phone calls to one of the U.S. officers that had gotten involved in this case as well. I forget if he was an officer, Senate. He was some importancy, and he would receive threatening phone calls, like, shut up about it. The sheriff was even quoted saying, "I'm over this case. I wish everybody would just drop it."
Yeah.
And years later, when they found what the evidence was, it even seemed like the sheriff or the police department themselves had hired someone to call this guy and say that this had happened and that was not proven to be correct. The whole case itself looks like it was just completely corrupted on purpose, which also makes me believe. And if the shoes and stuff were found so many years later in perfect condition, I mean, the pants were tore up a little bit. The police said it would be 4 years later before they would be able to find evidence. And on exactly 4 years later, the evidence turned up. So to me, I think that's all what you were talking about with
traffic.
Yeah, unfortunately. But
that's a whole nother topic, really.
But I think for tonight, we have covered Mount Shasta in every way I could possibly. I'm sure I missed some things here and there, so don't come at me in the comments. I'm sure you do know more if you're willing to make some comments about it. But this is what we know.
You don't know enough and haven't listened. That's commenting.
Oh, we get those too. And it's like, if you would have listened, then you wouldn't be making the comment. But anyways. I guess.
But we love all of it.
Yes. So we do love everyone who decides to make a comment. Maybe one day they'll decide to actually listen to it. That'd be great.
Come for us and we'll really love you.
Yes. We love all of you, even the haters. But I guess.
Well, thank you for taking us to California, to Mount Shasta.
Yes, you are welcome. I guess with that being said, we'll say
good night.
And pleasant nightmares.
Bye.
Bye.